want to thank everyone for giving up their, their Monday night here, coming in for what is sort of the first since I've been involved in my capacity as Director of Coaching for the whole association. In this domestic coaches clinic, which is really targeted at, we've sort of called it again for advanced or experienced domestic coaches. We recognise that a lot of the stuff we often do is, tailored to your novice domestic coach who sort of, needs to know how to organise the kids and, how should the activities look and how do I teach kids to dribble, shoot, pass, all those sort of things. But what we recognise is that there's a cohort of coaches who may not be currently involved in rep basketball, or who, for them, they coach a higher level, so Div 1 or 2 domestic basketball, or are just interested in expanding their knowledge in where sort of international basketball and some of the trends and concepts are heading. So what we've put together is this first sort of clinic around advanced team offence concepts. What we're going to be covering today, obviously the word advanced is, relative according to what you're sort of working with. We're going to have a quick recap of the fundamental 2-player actions that sort of make up what we're going to be talking about when we start to look at the more advanced 3-player actions. And then we're going to go through, I've got video of sort of examples of each in play, 6 different, for what lack of a better term, you could call plays, but they are actions involving 3 players that are being used a lot in not just international basketball, lots of clips from sort of NBA, Europe, WNBA, but also very much forming part of the style of play that a lot of our sort of older rep teams are playing, because it's what is being used in Victorian style of play and Australian style of play. So some of these, if you're coaching players that have sort of rep athletes, particularly around under 16s, 18s, they'll no doubt be familiar with some of the actions here. But we're also going to talk about then how we sort of structure, and teach offence in sides of the floor, and we'll scratch the surface at the end. I know it's a really quick fire hour today. This is mainly focusing on the offensive side of things, but we will briefly talk about some basics for how to, having a philosophy for defence as well. I will there's opportunities for input or questions, and certainly at the end, but as we go as well, if you want to pick brains on, hey, which one's most appropriate for under 14s or this group, we can talk about that certainly as we go along. So I'm going to assume this base level of knowledge sort of coming in, and if some of this stuff is new on the screen to you, don't worry, but it does mean this is sort of my base level of knowledge. I'm not going to dive back into these sort of things. This will all get emailed to you out as well, this slide, so I haven't given you any printouts today, so you can just sort of immerse yourself in what we're covering, and then I'll email this stuff out to you tomorrow as well. So the 4 key 2-player actions, okay, so these are actions that just involve 2 players here that form the basis, I feel, of all these advanced concepts we're about to see moving forward, will be the dribble handoff, the ball screen, okay, the gets action, which is a stationary handoff where you pass to a player and then sprint and get the ball back for them, okay, rather than having a player dribble towards you for that handoff, and the away screen, okay. So within these, again, I've put here some key teaching points here. When we think about the dribble handoff and when I watch at domestic or rep level, the main things that players do that make them ineffective, they're dribbling at their teammate, okay, to give the handoff rather than thinking of it like a screen, okay. So dribbling at the defender, okay, of the teammate they're trying to get open is a key skill that I think is a quick win we can do with all our teams. When they're holding the ball, I've got my basketball with me today here, but holding out sort of north and south poles, okay, for the player to take on that dribble handoff. And the key thing being around a receiver must take the ball. So if I'm giving a handoff here to Tim, it's Tim's job to sprint past and take the ball from me, okay, rather than me giving it to him, okay? It's important we draw that clarity with athletes with the dribble handoff, because otherwise you get those situations where he maybe thinks he's going to grab it and then he decides not to, and I decide to half give it to him. We've all seen it, and the ball just sort of dribbles, through halfway. The gets action, again, look very similar. With a lot of the teaching points around here are all very similar because they're all essentially screens in some way. Even the dribble handoffs and the gets, we want to use our body to make it like a screen. All of these actions are designed to create momentary 2-on-1s, okay, which you can then use to create, to exploit that chaos and, use that advantage to score or get a good scoring opportunity from. So like we talk about with screens and the gets, you want to have as a player, and this will all make sense when we watch the videos later on, with ball screens as well, players need to be pointing their back where they want their teammate to get open, okay? A lot of this we commonly see with players where they will be going to set a screen for their teammate with the ball over here, and they run straight in, and and set that screen that way with their back pointing back up towards the 3-point line. Handy if you want to get your teammate a wide open 3, you know, maybe that's the case with a second or 2 left in the quarter, okay? But more commonly, we want to get them, okay, to the key, to the basket. So we want to, you know, then step in and set that screen, you know, on the defenders, what we call like their back pocket, okay, pointing our back towards this space where we want them to get open to. Okay, so that's one of the key teaching points I see with both, you know, dribble handoffs, but particularly screens as well, that we'll talk about as we go through. With the ball screen, you know, we talk about things, and this happens with handoffs as well, setting up the defender. A lot of players, when they're about to come off a screen or a handoff, they're like telegraphing to the player that that's what's about to happen. We're like waiting for the screen to come in, waiting for it, ready to dribble off it. You know, that art of deception and like setting up your defender like a little jab the other way and keeping them occupied before we actually attack off the screen. Now, depending on your level, you're going to need to have, you know, things like beginners calling wait, go, you know, before you come off a screen. So as I'm setting a screen, you know, for Tim, I'm calling like wait, go. That way I'm not getting myself stuck with a moving screen, okay? And we're giving ourselves the most, you know, opportunity there. Common point that I see with the ball screen is that and I see it domestic sometimes, is a player doesn't use the screen. And what I mean by that is teammate comes and sets the screens and they go and drive the other direction. Okay, we sort of go, no, you know, use the screen, okay? It is actually okay and then sometimes beneficial if they do go the other way to where the screen is set, you know? So as long as the player has created chaos and got past their defender, like the screen has been effective, regardless of which way they go off it. Away screen, and again, we've all seen that, you know, I pass to Tim, I go and screen for Raj to get him open, okay? I'll talk a lot about this rule of opposites, where the screener and the cutter have to go 2 different ways. One has to go to the basket, one has to go to the 3-point line. So in the example over here, I've made a pass to a player over here, so they've got the ball. And I'm setting a screen for my teammate over here, okay? One of us has to go to the basket and one of us has to go to the 3-point line. So that means if this player curls, the screener's got to come back to the 3-point line, okay? If this player had come off the screen and sprint up to the 3-point line, then this player's diving to the basket, okay? But either way, we're getting one go one way, one getting the other way. That's the rule of opposites we'll see as we go along. So let's have a look at some 3-player actions here. Actually, before I do that, I'll actually just come back here. Hands up if you currently use in your team's offence a dribble handoff. If that's part of like your team's toolkit that you'll use, okay? Hands up. Well, I don't know, Raj, you've currently got under 12, but Raj, you heard it. Apologies. You know, you've currently got under 12s, I think it was, but you've had under 16s previously. It helped you, yeah. So again, you might not be using any of these with the current group, but hands up if you're using ball screens currently in your toolkit. Okay. Gets action. Anyone?
We don't. They don't do it.
Okay. We've taught it. They may not have learned it, but it's fair enough. And away screens that are happening sort of off the ball. Okay, I mean, commonly we see them in sort of, baseline plays, sideline plays, things like that. What we're talking about here is within the context of, when we're free flowing in offence. All right, no worries. So that gives me a bit of a gauge of which ones will probably be easiest to pick up and which ones will be toughest. First one we're going to look at is called shake action. Now, shake action, I've got a video to show each one of these. So if you learn best by diagrams, great. If you learn best by video, I'll show you that in a moment. But shake is a general term used to talk about a ball screen, okay, where it's a loaded ball screen. So what we're talking about there is where the ball side corner, there's a player in that corner, okay? So there's 2 different types. You can either have an empty ball screen where the corner's empty. So you can imagine that player 2 might be over here. We'd have 3 players over on this side and no one in that corner. It's just a pure screen for the 5 for the 1, okay? Again, this is a loaded ball screen where we've got someone in the corner, okay? The benefits of that is I like this style of screen a lot where there's a player in the corner because it takes away, as this player would traditionally come and drive here off their pick and roll, rather than seeing a wall of sort of 3 split line defenders, okay? This one's a very hard position to help from as we'll go through. So what we're going to see here, the key that makes it the shake is that, again, this player is lifting up almost like on a magnet as their player drives. So let's go and have a look at the few clips here. So we're just going to see a series of clips here, and I want you to be looking at, where the ball screen's taking place, but also that this, so you'll see here, we've got this 3 in the corner, we've got our ball screen here, they're going to lift up out of the corner. Now their defender then has had a really tough decision to make here. Are we going to stay with the roller or are we going to stay with the shooter? You can see here there's a 2-on-1 here, almost very hard. Again, it's sort of remove that help defender and results in the open look. That's sort of why we want players to sort of look to move off the drive. Again, this player's lifting up here off the pick and roll. Again, similar to the last one, we get players moving from everywhere there. So that's what we're looking for in that particular action there. So the key teaching points, if we're looking at an action like this, we want the driver to brush shoulders with the screener. Right, a lot of the times when I see players come off screens, they leave a huge gap for their defender to just come right through. Yeah, you see Raj, you see Yudi. Yep. So, really teaching them, and if we're practicing at 2-on-0, just at training, or maybe it's a little shooting game to warm up, or in this instance, it might be like a 3-on-0 game, would be a great way to sort of warm up. I've done versions like this of a game where it's, we've got 3 players and and we've got a team on this side and a team on this side. And, we'll have the ball screen and they come off and it might be, all right, first to get, and again, it could be 10 off the drive, 10 off the roller, and then 5 or 2 or 3 3-pointers for that player out there in the, who's lifting up out of the corner. Again, we want that screener's angle to be downhill, pointing their back towards the basket where they're trying to get the player open. And again, that strong side player really lifting up out of that. Any questions on the shake action? Look, yes and no. What I think I see, a common philosophy, if you watch the Australian Boomers at the most recent World Cup, and now a lot of our teams now are using that zone offence they used as our zone offence. It looks very similar to a matchup offence. It involves a dribble handoff into a ball reversal, into a ball screen, so I think often with zone offences, and I'm probably a bit guilty of contributing to this because I teach it at courses that I do, is we rely on a lot of these very choreographed zone offences that are sort of you cut to here, we'll get a little high post and low post and those sort of things. But your matchup offence can be just as effective against ball screens can be highly effective against the zone. So potentially, this may have, because if you picture, we just sort of roughly, on the fly here, look at our, think about if we were playing against a zone quickly, this player may not be chasing it as high after, they might be a little bit further back, but really in the scheme of things, as they come off this and this player's engaged in the drive, this player's coming out, potentially we're getting a shooting opportunity out of that because that player's got a big decision to make on how far do I protect this versus this player lifting out. So yes, every example I'm showing tonight is probably predominantly matchup, but I would say if you're coming up against a zone, see if your players can find ways to sort of, to exploit that as well.
If you in the zone, you probably have your corner receiver, you get to it for a 3 or his back cut.
Potentially as well. There's a number of different scenarios. We can, a lot of the different ways I break zones these days just use simple slice cuts, overloads, things like that. So what that play probably achieves and what we're seeing here is a little bit of overload. You could have your weak side doing something as well, which we'll see on one of the next scenarios, rather than having these 2 players just standing still, as they might be doing something as well. These are all combinations though of, and this one really isn't even a combination of 2-player actions, it's just a ball screen, okay? But as we go through, there's going to be a few different options where we're basically seeing, these simple 2-player actions, and we're just seeing mathematically them added together to make an action. So the next one we'll look at is a perfect example of that, is pistol action, okay? Pistol action is a dribble handoff plus a ball screen, okay? One following the other. This is quite a popular one I find because it's a nice easy entry point for athletes. I've shown these all as 5-out spacing today. there are easy sort of adjustments if you are running 4 out and 1 in. It just means that your big, traditionally the 5, might be coming from down low to step up and set the screen rather than, you know, coming from outside the 3-point line, okay? But the key thing that I'm working on, and you know, we're running a similar sort of thing with my under 20 girls at the moment, is, you know, setting up the handoff. You see up here in the top right, player number 2, who's about to come off that handoff to start with, is sort of stepping away from the handoff before they're coming up to it. Okay, so again, rather than sort of telegraphing what they're, you know, going to do, that little process of taking your defender away from the action and then to take them into it is really important. And actually what it starts to open up is other things like back cut opportunities. You'll traditionally see that, you know, quite often after you've got 1 or 2 sort of handoffs, the 2 has a great option to sort of step low and then just stay low and cut straight to the basket, like as soon as the defence gets onto that a little bit. Let's have a look at it. This is an example from Basketball Breakdown. You'll see a coach actually sort of trying to teach it here to the athletes, and then you'll just see them go up and down and run it 3 times without any defence, but looking for a different scoring option each time.
Run it here for, let's do the shot, let's do the dribble pitch inside ball screen and get a shot for 10th line. Get a back screen for you. Flare screen, hammer. And let's get a shot there. But then when you come down, you know, when you get the ball out, go down this way into it, different shot, and then come back again into a different shot.
I like to do this style often if I'm, maybe don't have a full court necessarily, but if I'm teaching offense and it, rather than just running the same, you know, choreography for a few times or the same scoring option, giving them some choice on, I want to see it 3 different ways, like 3 different times, but 3 different scoring options. You know, what he was talking about on the weak, he said, you know, I want to see a flare screen on the, or a hammer screen on the weak side. So you'll see that when they're going, yes, it's a 3-player action on one side, there's just an away screen happening on the weak side at the same time. And that helps. It shouldn't be much more complex for athletes because these are all the same like building blocks. I talk about team offense as being little Lego bricks. You've got your dribble handoff Lego brick, your ball screen Lego brick, your away screen Lego brick, and the aim is that players can sort of almost put those together or stack those a little bit in a variety of different ways. But, oops, I jumped forward there accidentally. Forward and just skip.
Let's shoot it and get a shot for 10th line. Get a back screen for him. Flare screen, hammer, and let's get a shot there. But then when you come down, you know, get the ball out, go down this way into it, different shot, and then come back again into a different shot. Okay? Ready? Go.
Yeah, he dribbles a little bit too much of his teammate for my liking, but we get that dribble handoff and straight away into that ball screen. We'll see them come down and go again up the other end. On this left-hand side, there's just going to be some screening to get them busy, but the key thing we're looking at there is dribble handoff, straight away into a ball screen. So that time they found the roller. On the 3rd time, from memory, they actually go back out to the player in the corner. So they kick it out to there. And that may also be for some teams as well. They might often decide to actually, that's a good way to get a post player open too, is we see he took the 3-point option, but as he comes through, oops,
There we go, good.
okay, he's sort of gone out to the shooter, but it could easily go in then to that player who's rolling as well. So this is, I think this is a really common one, again, because if your players, as most of you have, like the dribble handoff and the ball screen in your toolkit, this is something that can sort of, again, they can add an extra layer of complexity to it. Pistol action, if you Google it on YouTube, it loosely applies to anything that these sort of 3 players do. So sometimes you will see versions where it's a little like it's sort of a gets handoff or it's a screen. Just going to stick with the sort of basics, today, because again, even with sort of rep athletes, that's sort of majority of what we'll sort of, do. But again, setting up the handoff really important, and if you're teaching it, and making sure the screening angle is sort of, hey, let's actually try and get them towards the keyway and the basket on that one. Third one, action we're going to cover off is zoom action, which is a away screen, specifically a down screen, plus a dribble handoff, okay? This is a really common one that we've started probably introducing into our rep teams in the last 18 months or so. So a fair number of those teams now, particularly sort of under 16s, 18s, and then maybe even like our under 14 ones these days, we're sort of starting to introduce that sort of offense a few months in. So we can see here we have a player, traditionally our sort of big, out here with the ball, okay. We have the middle player going to set us down screen for this player in the corner, and the 5 is going to find a dribble handoff for that player coming off that. So if you're this player here in the corner, you're in essence, you've got a screen coming to start with to free you up from your defender, and now you're sprinting at full pace off that handoff from your teammate, okay. That's one of the reasons why this is quite popular, is because it's tougher to defend than a dribble handoff, because you think about the standard dribble handoff, your defender's sort of right there with you, and they can sort of switch it or they can do whatever. This one, we've added in a layer of complexity with this. Number 3 is now going to be hopefully free or loose of their defender, or maybe guarding a different defender, and they can really come at pace off that screening action there. So I'll show it first, and then we'll come back to some of the teaching points.
The zoom action is a lot like a down or flare screen action, so that involves 3 players. The player in the middle of the zoom is the screen. Their job is to screen the defender who is guarding the offensive player coming off the zoom. They want to make sure their shoulders are square, so their back is facing the player with the basketball. The player receiving the screen comes right off the screen toward the player with the basketball. And finally, the player with the basketball job is to dribble right at the screener and then turn their body to deliver the handoff. Let's take a look at why the zoom actions are so effective. Zoom actions are a great example of creating good spacing, not only the offensive players, but also the defensive players. Look how the action created a bunched up situation on one side of the floor. Usually this would be considered bad offense. But what it creates is 3 defensive players bunched up as well, and takes away a help defender. The result of this action from a bunched alignment creates great spacing, thus opening large gaps to attack the basket.
One other concept, which is probably worth talking about here, is playing off 2 feet. So you'll just notice that this guy who finishes here, so mute that. That finish close to the basket around contact, finishing off sort of a jump stop and power layup rather than a 1 foot, that is increasingly being referred to in international basketball as playing off 2 feet. Gives players a stronger base to play off. So I'd certainly encourage you sort of keeping that in mind with your athletes, and teaching them to sort of that ability to either to not just finish but to also potentially pivot, pass out of that rather than always finishing on 1 foot. Generally now it's if you're wide open, okay, you finish with 1 foot. If you've got contact, okay, and you're finishing against contact, play off 2 feet. Come to that sort of jump stop and finish with that sort of power layup as well. So zoom action, if we just go again back to here and our sort of teaching points, you saw they talked about, again, the player seeing this first screen, point their back to where they want to get open to, which is the player getting the handoff for them. Okay. Now they didn't have it in any of these examples, but we talked about on any away screen, we want this rule of opposites to take place. So when kids have got the basics of this choreography, the down screen, the dribble handoff, they're playing out of that, we then want to introduce them to, some of the I guess, extra decisions where, again, we say off a down screen, for example, this player might decide to curl, okay, to the basket. Now, if this player curls, this player then is the one to come off the dribble handoff. Right? That's we want again, one person going to the basket, one person, coming towards the ball or whatever. Again, in this instance, we want someone coming off the handoff, so it can either be this guy, great, he can come off the handoff, okay? Or if he decides to curl, then what you'll often see is this player come back up and be the one getting the handoff. That is again, as you're teaching your athletes, would just be a case of saying, again, giving this player some license, he might be able to back cut off that, he might be able to, curl, he might be able to sprint. So there's a variety of options players can explore off these. That's why, and we'll talk about the end, one of these might be sufficient for your team for, half a season. And depending on which group might even be the whole season. But because there's just so much you can probably explore, and granted you've only got, a 45-minute session, half court once a week. Something like this, you can practice 3-on-3 and get a lot out of it, but you've still got a lot of time to spend on, building up shooting and an array of different things for your athletes. Has anyone ever used, Steve, did you use when you had a rep program last year, did you use Zoom at all? Or?
Getting some of those guys to do 3.
It is tough. And look, absolutely, there's, we'll come, obviously later on is some of this stuff might be it's like, yeah, okay, hit. But I'd rather come in and say, hey, let's advance. Let's pitch the bar high and show you a range of different things. And you might be able to take one and sort of do it with your team, or did they? There were a few guys from Rep were there, or is it? There you go.
Would you encourage, if they're overplaying the screen, the ball handoff to back cut, teach them to, if the defender's overplaying?
Which player? Sorry.
Like, let's say 24 is getting defended.
Yep.
If that guy overplays him, you'd be happy for 24 to back cut.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is quite a common one. So as this player would say, be dribbling at them. So he's starting to come towards it. He might absolutely, this player comes out, absolutely back cut, and then it just might be that this player is then coming back and getting the handoff instead. So we're still getting something, still getting a handoff.
They overplay the ball handoff and the player just back cut.
Yeah. And that's probably comes back to the basic concept of, I'll say the dribble handoff probably. Back cut is obviously a fairly, is a fundamental concept like that, but I think we get to practice it most in the dribble handoff because, again, you're dribbling at a teammate's defender and that teammate has to read, is it time to go off the handoff? Is it time to go back cut though, depending on what the teammate does? Depending on what their defender does. So I think absolutely, like, often dribble handoff, we practice it sort of a bit monotonously. It's like, okay, come off the handoff. But I think the beauty starts to be when you explore those sort of things like not using the handoff but back cutting if it's open and, and doing those sorts of things as well. Okay, we're moving through. Next up is a staggered screen. Okay, so it's sometimes called like double, action, but really it's just two away screens. Okay, setting for a player. So in this instance, the diagram I'm sort of giving you, our point guard has made, pass to the 5, the 5's pass to the 4, and both of those players now are going to go and screen for the 2. Okay. Now, yes, a lot of the clips we're about to watch are for a 3-point shooter, and my under 20 girls last year made a living off, Hannah McKinnon coming off those 2 screens and knocking down the 3. Okay. It doesn't always have to be the 3 though. Some of your players might go, light their eyes up. Yes, this plays for me, whatever. But the idea is that it creates a lot of chaos and that this play might be so open that, again, if a defender's coming at them, maybe it's not, hey, have you practiced that shot? Maybe it's not your shot, but let's now attack and drive to the basket from there. So let's have a quick look at the at some examples of double away screens, I should say. And we'll come back a lot of teaching points.
The stagger screen is characterized by 2 screeners setting off-ball screens for a cutter in a staggered formation. You'll see in this first clip the 2 screeners are going to step in and set a staggered screen, and the cutter's coming out of the corner to get the ball.
What I want you to actually watch here, so we've seen these 2 screens come. We can see the gap that's been created off this, defender here. This second screener is commonly, as we saw, is like your big, like that. And this second screen is where you apply the rule of opposites. Remember I said one player coming off the screen is going to go to the 3-point line, one's going to go to the basket, okay? That's what you're going to see on all these clips here. And it sort of happens naturally because, again, it's like, shooter coming off. But the big as well, they move to the, they dive to the basket. Now, in this instance, in the next few clips, you'll see it's almost like they're getting into rebounding position, which is fine and probably inappropriate. But that might also be a dive for a post look or something down the track as well. So I just want you to look, because it is a sort of an advanced teaching point, I think, as you're working on this with your group. It's not just set your screens and stand still. It's set your screens and then, there can be some funky stuff with, with these 2 plays here. We'll pick it up from where it was there. They're diving out, open 3.
Next clip, we'll see the same play being ran. They set that staggered screen and then they come out of the corner to catch that ball.
So they're sprinting at pace off that.
Now, it should be noted that you don't always have to run over both of the screens. If it's deemed necessary by the way the defender is playing you, you can actually run in between them. But be sure, as with other screens, that you are setting your defender up to give yourself a better opportunity to get it. Let's check some clips out again live, so this way you see how it works.
So have a look at, I guess, the cutter, yeah. We talk about setting up the defender, that little step or hesitation away before you actually sprint up off those screens. That might have happened a bit quickly, so I'm just going to go back and...
So this would be a good, last couple of seconds money inbound.
Yeah, some people use it to start the offense. Some people use to finish up. You can see actually, great example here. I think this one of the following one is off a it might be the next one is off an inbounds, like is a sideline play, and I use that again with my team. I think when you're coming up with sideline plays, it's best if they link already with your offense. So if you've got something like this in your toolkit already, that can just be what you do straight from the sideline. You don't need other choreography to sort of teach them. This one, you can just see the player, and I'll even go back to it again, just the effort to set up their player, just step away a little bit through that chaos, and then sort of sprint and try and, get away from them. This final one against an inbounds pass. One other common thing that some teams will do, and again, if we don't always want this player to be it's just for threes at the moment, is that potentially this player, rather than going to the basket, might come back and set a ball screen, for example. And that's our sort of emphasis. We're trying to get, this player a ball screen. You can look at some things that, again, it's all about layering together these different actions. So it might be a common one is, we've just passed the ball to this player. Maybe we're coming back and sprinting and getting it back from them on a handoff or something like that. So these are all, again, sort of this stagger action is again quite common in a lot of offenses. Again, it can be used to start the offense. It can be used to, variety of different sort of parts. Again, we want players to screen their defender, not open space. The challenge often is we practice it without defense, just to get the flow of things. And then when we go and play it, all of a sudden the defense is, say, we could do it in a game and the defense is over here in the key. They're sort of packing in a bit. We go, well, hang on, how do we now sort of, do that? So players need to adjust their screen and actually find the player they want to screen. That's a common thing I think when you're teaching off-ball screens is players not just running and setting screens on air and actually trying to find the defender. Again, we saw that second screen follows that rule of opposites. So if the player coming off the screen was to go all the way to the three-point line, as we saw in all those examples, great. Then the screener's going to dive to the basket and they're going to go the opposite way. Okay. If and I'll maybe just try and go forward to one example so we can sort of get a bit of a flavour for it. If this player who's currently sprinting to the three-point line decided, oh, hang on, I'm just going to curl into this free space here and get the layup. Perfect look, great look, okay? We then might say to this player, well, you're going to go the opposite. So if she curls, you're going to sprint back to the three-point line and you're going to get it at the three-point line, okay? Rather than, obviously, we don't want her curling and then she dives into the same space, okay? So that's why I sort of talk about that rule of opposites. And if the kids do that, it's like a accordion or an elastic band, like you stretch the defense out, and one of those players is generally going to get wide open if you teach them to sort of play on that rule there. Moving forward, we've got two more to go, and I realise it's probably a bit throwing on you here, but again, I'll share the recording with you, and again, welcome to come back to any of this as you go along. The next one is split action, being used a lot by some of the Australian boomers at the moment. And in our rep program as well, because it links with Basketball Victoria's using it a lot. It's one of the sort of in vogue actions. We've got a lot of Golden State Warriors clips coming up because they are the ones that, I won't say certainly they are the ones that popularised it. I won't say they created it, but what it is passing into a post player. Now that can be high post or low post, okay, and then doing an away screen, okay, for one of the players. Now I've done it here, that they've passed into the post and they've now gone and screened for this player. They could also screen for this player down here. Okay, so it can be one or the other. All right, it's entirely up to the athlete, or you might steer them towards one or the other. Okay, what we're going to look for from the post is some basic post principles. Strong target hand. Okay, find the ball there. I often talk to the cutters about being sneaky. This is Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. We're going to see in the clips like that. It's often a little bit of like, you don't know who's coming off it. It's the screen doesn't have to be sort of perfect, but it's all about creating that chaos. And then again, you'll see that sort of rule of opposites where one's going to go to the basket and one's going to go to the three-point line. Now, again, when it's practiced in our rep programs and in a lot of state programs, and probably I think in the Australian style of play, it is a high post here. A lot of this you're going to see is with Draymond in a low post. It's the same principle that we're looking at here. So Wait, see, there's the post. So here's the post feed coming down here. And now a screen away. So 2 players have gone with 1. The other player goes to the basket. Now I've chosen here to skip. Now these are all examples of where the cuts come, because I think that's where a lot of your options are going to come as a domestic coach if you're using this. Okay, the first half of this video was all just players coming off for the 3. Clay Thompson, I was like, not sure that's how we, or necessarily going to be all that beneficial for you necessarily, but keep going. So again, see a back screen here and a cut. Pass into the low post, tough angle. Again, that screen wasn't perfect. I want to just go back so you can see that again. Didn't necessarily follow all the rules of like getting a hit and getting contact or anything like that, but it created the chaos. And they both went with Steph, and you can see that the other player cuts through here. So something like this is good because it again teaches your players to like read and cut. It's less reliant on like a driver who's super skilled or anything like that. It starts to, I guess, teach the joy of the game a little bit, and that sort of off-ball movement. You can see that was barely even. I mean, that pass really is the winner on that, not necessarily the cut. So again, pass, steps to set the screen, and then dives out of that as well. So again, boiling it back to its simple principles, it's passing into a post player, it can be high post or low post, and then going and setting a screen. I often talk to my athletes about not necessarily pass and cut or pass and screen, but pass and create. Because that, as you start to build things in their toolkit, they might have pass and cut by all means, or it might be pass and screen away, or it might be again, pass and follow into a ball screen, depending on where it's passed. So, giving your role as coaches, I guess, is to keep giving these different Lego bricks to kids, and then they can, as they get more advanced, you can start to build it up into bigger things. But this is all about 2 key skills, which is a post feed and an off-ball screen, I should say. And again, we're seeing sort of different rules here, or again, the same rule of opposites apply on who might go towards the 3. Or cuts from there. Any questions around using that with teams?
I get it, and man on man a little bit more.
Yep.
When we've got 2 in the back, 2 in the front, 3 at the back, and they're not moving almost.
Yep.
Like it creates you open to 3-point shot.
This one's definitely a tough one to run against a zone, admittedly. Some of the others I'll give you, particularly like a stagger, could add some value against the zone. Pistol particularly, I like. My under 20s last year, again, we're playing against best girls at their age in the state. We would run pistol on this side as we had a ball as a screen happening on the second side. So
So that would be against the zone.
And that became our zone offense. Yeah, correct, or part of it. So if I just roughly map out sort of let's go 2-3 zone here. And we were again running that sort of pistol 2, 4, and 2. It looks how it exactly is, but the key is that everyone's got to find someone within the sort of 1. So again, this dribble handoff might be a little bit. There's not necessarily someone we're taking. It's just more of a sort of ball movement. But this player's coming in and finding that ball screen. Now, as we're doing that, I forget if we might have even done a flare screen, or it could have been. Stepping in, and this player was just sort of setting a down screen. But the key is that we're or it might have even been this player sort of just. But the key is really against the zone. You're trying to get the ball inside the key somehow, with 2 feet, and then having the zone collapse on it and finding your shooters out of that. So something like this, can achieve that, particularly if this player is driving into the key. This player is sort of rolling in and taking some attention. You've then got sort of players out there. So again, look, I'll just come back to something like split. Definitely. What percentage of a game are you sort of facing zones at the moment? Like, is it like 90% of the time? Is that a similar experience to others?
Yeah, under 18 girls, 9 most of the time.
Yep.
Girls are doing a lot because the skill drops away so much. Girls, but it's the boys. I I think big man on man, at least.
Yeah, we mixed up just to break it up.
I think
Yep.
what the age group and age team.
Yeah, well, let's quickly go around. Say age group and gender.
Are girls 18?
Yep.
18 to 3, but under 12 to 2.
Twos, yep.
18 to 2. Six day ones.
Yep. Yep.
Both boys, 81.
Yep.
How about 16?
Yep. Okay. So we're seeing, a wide array. At the time at the end, I'll talk a little bit about, just a zone offence or two that I, use. But, it's the same 5 principles of like a club coaching course. It's, it's things like your positioning, your overload, your penetration, your motion, and your ball reversal. We can talk about that a little bit at the time. I want to make sure I cover the things you want to see as well. The final one is called Spain Action. So if anyone's ever heard of, you talk about Spanish pick and roll and what that is, it is a pick and roll, but then there is a back screen set for the roller afterwards. So a few teams use, in sort of if we're looking at some of our older rep teams, like an 18-1 boys or some of our like youth league might start to use things like this. But it is, again, if you're looking for something where it's like your kids know the ball screen as an offense, for example, or as a building block, if you're picking one out of the things that we're saying here that you might like to try with your team, again, this might be one of them that you look at. It's probably not the first one I'd necessarily picked. It's a little bit sort of non-traditional, but again, I want to make sure I'm showing you a range of things that all sort of, are being used in a lot of elite competitions. So let's have a look at it first, and then we can, have a talk about it. But what you're going to see is, again, a pick and roll happening here in the middle of the court, and then you're going to see a player step in and screen, generally a shooter, come in and screen for the back of the player.
Spain pick and roll is an action where a ball screen is set in the middle of the floor, while a guard, usually a shooter, simultaneously sets a back screen on the ball screen's defender before popping to the perimeter. Typically, the 2 players not directly involved in the action are located in the corners to keep the ball screen spacing. The action has proven extremely difficult to guard and an effective go-to set, which is why we are seeing a spike in popularity over the past few seasons. Getting right into it, Spain pick and roll is most easily understood when broken down into 3 parts: the screener, the shooter, and the ball handler. The screener, usually a big, will look to set a middle ball screen for the ball handler. As this is happening, the shooter will headhunt the screener's defender and look to set a back screen as the screener rolls for the rim. The shooter will then pop to the perimeter after setting the back screen, looking for a catch and shoot opportunity. The ball handler will come off the initial middle ball screen with 3 potential scoring options. He can attack the rim or pull it off the dribble, hit the screener as he rolls to the rim, or hit the shooter as he pops to the perimeter.
So that's the crux of it there. Let's see if I can get some ankle on as well for you. What we're looking for there when we look at Spanish, pick and roll, is if I go back to the first clip there, and why I think it's, quite effective, is we look at this player who's about to, if you're guarding this screener here, you've just set the screen, or he's just set the screen, you're worried now about him rolling to the basket, and all of a sudden you go whack into the vent. Now they've got to decide, well, hang on, do I fight and try and stay with him? This shooter is sprinting right out to the 3-point line. And so now this player has to make the decision on, hang on, I was preparing to guard this shooter. Now all of a sudden I've been stuck with the 7-foot guy or whatever. How do I navigate that? And like any away screen, it's just designed to, and we saw it with split action as well, we're just trying to create that chaos and the chance that, 2 might get sucked in and go with 1, and then what do we then, do with the other there? So again, you can see it's almost like, again, that like rule of opposites we see on a screen that's happening off the ball. One of you is going to go to the basket, which is this play here. One of you is going to go to the 3-point line, and the elastic of that, or is what's creating the gaps. For players to work with. They do it with confidence. It doesn't matter if which one goes which way. Obviously, there's some perks here in the tall going to the basket, the shooter going towards the rim. Okay, but that utilising that chaos and playing out of that.
Is anyone here for the player? I'll get past him and dunk like that.
No.
Just not.
And look, it's probably, you know, when we looked at, right at the start, we looked at this shake action where we had the, you know, just the ball screen. And if you remember in the clips from that, you know, there was often no split line D because of how it was it was a wide open, yeah, that didn't have to be a lob for a dunk necessarily, but are we lobbing to someone who now has some space to play with? Yeah, so you're right. I wish we had someone with the capacity to dunk it, yeah, potentially. So again, keys with this, the back screen has got to be flat. What I mean by that is they're like facing sort of parallel to the sidelines and sort of like a, yeah, back to the basket. The 3 S's. Now these are the same for every single ball screen, but also sort of like away screens as well. Basketball Victoria talks about sprint, smart, separate. It used to be sprint, smash, separate. Okay, the idea being that if you're setting a screen, you want to sprint in, you don't want to walk in, you want to get there, you know, quickly. You want to smash the opponent. I always say to players, you know, not even from just from a avoiding fouls perspective, you want to take contact, not make contact. But that idea that getting a smash and getting contact on the screen is really important, and then separate. Why they've gone to sort of smart, that idea of make a smart decision when you're within the, you know, within the screen, is because, as you can sort of see in some of those clips, as players develop, there's a lot wider range of things for them to do off those sort of screens. We saw those like with this off-ball screens with, you know, Steph Curry and the Warriors. It's a little bit more finesse of like, not necessarily of just smack someone and then dive to the basket. It's sort of a little bit of like, there's times where you may not even set the screen, where you might start to go, and this is particularly common against teams that say like to switch on your screens or handoffs, is actually you don't even set the screen because they're just going to switch it. So you start to set the screen and then just dive to the basket. Okay, that's called slipping the screen. If you want to go and Google that or YouTube that later on. You know, so that's why it's now, so the 3 S's are still important, and sometimes I still use sprint, smash, separate, because there's certain groups I want them to get the feeling of you need to get in there, you know, take a contact, don't just let them, you know, go past. You've got to set your screen with the right angle so that you can take contact, and then separate, whether that's sprinting to the basket or whether that's sprinting to the 3-point line. Sometimes talk to players about like just escaping the scene of the crime. You know, we hit that screen and then let's not stand still. Let's get away from the scene of the crime. Let's sprint to the 3-point line. Let's sprint to the basket there. Now, when we're teaching offense to athletes, what you'll hear a lot of, and, you know, start to talk about an elite. I was going to say elite, but you know, if you've watching sort of, you know, Big V NBL 1 training session, they might say, you know, we're in this on the first side. We're in. Let's get to the second side, or let's get to, you know, third side. Okay. All this means is often when we're starting to teach offense, we talk about the first side being the side of the floor when we come up the floor. Now, for most teams, you know, with right-hand dominant athletes, that tends to be the right-hand side of the floor 90% of the time, okay? As soon as we reverse the ball, now we might do something over here, it might be a, you know, pass and cut, it might be a dribble handoff, okay, ball screen, something, okay? But as soon as we reverse it, now we're into second side, okay? And then again, we might have a separate action that we're looking for with athletes to complete on that side, but as soon as we reverse it again, now we're on third side. If you're watching, you know, NBL, WNBL, and obviously they're playing with a 24-second shot clock, you'll generally find teams have got probably 3 sides maximum, maybe 4 sides on a, you know, on a good day, okay? And before they've got to, you know, you've got to get a shot off at some point, okay? Obviously, when you're playing without shot clock, you know, you're not necessarily thinking in your teams in terms of, you know, let's get to, you know, you can probably get through 4 or 5 sides or whatever like that. But I guess what I want, this is going to lean into our next activity, is sometimes when I've been coaching athletes, I've been saying, and if I want to sort of talk to them about offense, often with a lot of our rep teams, we only really script the first side. We say, all right, on first side, we want to see a zoom action, or we want to see a dribble handoff, or we want to see a ball screen, for example, okay? And we may not, you know, we may not really try to burden them with what we want to see on the second side if the ball gets there, okay? We might leave that to their own devices. But commonly it might be, all right, we're a dribble handoff on the first side, and then if the ball gets to the second side, we're in zoom, or we're in a ball screen or something, for example. Okay, so we're actually telling them what we want to see on the first 2 sides. And then you might say, again, if we get the ball all the way to the third side, okay, so we've tried our dribble handoff, we've reversed it, we've tried our ball screen, okay, now we've reversed it back. Now I want to see split action, where I, you know, pass into the big and set a, you know, a way screen for, you know, for example. So obviously, I think with your offense, and again, depends on your athletes, I wouldn't be having, these complex actions on all three sides. Like we're obviously, I don't know, I'm preaching the choir, you're not going, let's Spain on first side and then we're going to be in Zoom on the second side and then half our rep teams, most of them can't even do something like that, okay? But it's another just concept I wanted to get you sort of, into, and maybe when you're choreographing offense for your team, yes, you're giving them some freedom, but if you feel there's a moment when you actually need to, they're all over the shop at the moment, you actually challenge them and go, all right, I want to see a dribble handoff on the first side, and if we don't get anything off that, we're going to go, it might even be a pass and then an away screen, or it might be a ball screen on the second side, for example. But you're actually sort of telling them, and you're building up an offense that might go for sort of 3 rotations, but you're still using those basic building blocks. There's nothing too complex or anything about that. So what I want you to do, and we're not going to get a chance to get through the full sort of side of this, but I just want you to have a go, again, with your whiteboard. I'll give you a few minutes to have a go creating sort of 3 sides of an offense. So you go, at least sort of start with 2. You can use 4-out or 5-out spacing on your whiteboard. That's fine. I think I even have a spare whiteboard here that I can lend if anyone wants to use it. And I'd just like you to try using 1 or 2 of these, different actions within it. Maybe you're going to try and draw up, okay, it's going to be a dribble handoff on the first side and then it's going to be a zoom maybe, and try one of the new ones that we've covered so far. I'm happy to bring any of them up, the diagrams up on the screen if you want as you're doing it, okay? We'll then see if we have time. I might even get you to just share as a group. I won't make you teach someone else just so we can get out of here on time. But I'd like you to be able to go at seeing if you can link some of those actions together into a bit of an offense, that might go from one side of the floor and then you reverse it, and the next one from there. Great. And I'll tell you, in terms of under 12s, literally all you're worried about probably is dribble handoff and gets. They're the 2. There's not much, other than that, it's really about sort of passing and their driving and things like that. As you're getting into under 14s like that, and potentially if you start to introduce a ball screen or way screen, then yeah, maybe you can be looking at a shake or a pistol. Again with a 14 Div 1 team is probably, getting towards achievable with particularly like a 16-1, you're looking at that. Some of these other ones, Spain, splits, you're really looking under 18, sort of Div 1 again. I pitched this course to sort of, or this lesson to sort of under 16, 18 Div 1, Div 2, sort of those sort of ones. So again, sort of showing those, and again, knowing that that's probably definitely at the higher end. And again, you can also, sort of coming forward, in terms of applying these to your team, and again, some of you may pick none of these, and that's totally okay. This is more about sort of expanding you some different things here. And again, all those clips you can sort of find on YouTube, and maybe you'll be watching some NBL or WNBL and see that action and go, oh, okay, I recognise that, sort of I can put a name to what they're doing there. That's a really important part of your development. Equally, you might create your own using different 2-player actions. So again, your girls have learnt, say, a dribble handoff. We've done that. They've learnt to get past the ball and sprint and get the ball back from that person. So maybe they're the 2 that you're combining from one to the other, to sort of put into practice there. But once you've got them, it's important we're playing a good slice of our training time in 3-on-3, 4-on-4 out of that action. The amount of time I would play, particularly again with out of that zoom action, that again is quite common with sort of under 16s and 18s teams, that if I've got 6 players at training, I'm just playing out of that for 15, 20 minutes, maybe changing up, the side and what positions players are in. But, realising I don't need 5-on-5 to make that happen, I can just really dial in on that little part of there. And then on games, again, you're right, it's probably hard to necessarily always get them through to, to a certain play or whatever that, but I would just recommend use your timeouts and your half time to always script whatever your next play is. I'm seeing this a lot with our sort of rep coaches on a Friday. We'll come in, we'll talk about, we need to pass the ball more and all this sort of bait, things like that, which is fine. But that skill of the, even domestic coach to go, right, I know the possession arrow is with our ball after half time. It's going to be our ball. Okay, I've looked in advance with 10 seconds to go, so I know that's the case. Girls, it's our ball at half time. Here, I wanted to see us run pistol. Or even, if we're dialing it back, I want to see a dribble handoff. Tara, you've been doing really good on the hustle on the rebound, so this dribble handoff's going to be for you. But we're using that timeout or that half time, whatever, to make sure that we're trying to get them practicing accountability to run what the coaches has asked them for as well. And I only just want to sort of, that obviously when you're guarding screens and handoffs and you're trying to tell players how to navigate around them, there's really, in summary, sort of three options they have, okay? And probably for the majority of you, probably going to stick within two of these options. We're either going to switch the handoff or the screen, or we're going to stay with our player, okay? Fight and stay with our players somehow. Now, there's a range of ways you can do that. We're not going to go into that today, okay? I certainly think we should be building the capability of players to stay with their player, okay? Reduce the mismatches and just the resilience and competitiveness component that it helps build in our athletes, okay? I find that, players start to switch by default and it can become a bit of sort of, it becomes passive and laziness. It just becomes lazy. We're trying to teach our players when you switch, if you're switching onto the player of the ball, like go and dig at it, try and like switch and disrupt. Don't just switch to sort of and let them do what they were planning on doing, okay?
Well, to go under or over, so the other players still got indication, you can go with them.
Exactly, and when you stay, it's exactly. Are you going to stay and are you going to fight over the screen? Are you going to fight under the screen? There's a lot of those things that start to come into play. Absolutely. Now, obviously, just if you're getting really sort of advanced, then you can also trap and double team obviously the ball screen, not an off ball screen as much. But I think starting to give your players some tools if you're coming up against screens and handoffs in a game on how you actually want them to navigate that. Giving them some confidence on, talking it and staying with your player or switching, whichever that is. I'll commonly switch on baseline plays, for example. I'll switch everything on that, but then other plays I might be, telling them to stay and fight from there. So we've just gone actually a tick over 7 o'clock. This is my first time running today's session, so I wanted to sort of just put some things out there, and you can always give me some feedback or things that helped you as you went along. But really, what we wanted to sort of cover was starting to move beyond these sort of 4 most common actions that hopefully you've seen. And again, used a little bit of in your offence, particularly if we're thinking about the target audience of this, under 16s, 18s, Div 1. Certainly your athletes, that if you've got any rep ones, will have a familiarity with this. And this may be where you spend most of your time sort of going. But we just want to show some examples of, and some of them that we're using in rep basketball. This one, again, I've used with sort of girls that are probably under 16, Div 2 girls, something like that. And again, we give it a fun name. It doesn't have to be the name that's on the board. And they, learn and play out of that choreography as it comes from there. I'm happy to stay around for sort of 5 minutes afterwards, but I'm aware it's sort of coming up to 7:05. Has anyone got any quick questions before I wrap this quick workshop though? Yep.
When I noticed a lot of these plays, and I noticed a rep player that plays in my team, the 5 staying out, when did the transition, I'm old school, a lot of these plays, the 5 is like where the 1 should be, right? And I find if they don't do this, the 5 just stands there all day and does nothing. So I'm wondering, is she getting mixed messages at rep going, hey, you stand here, but in domestic we're not making you do any action. So
Gonna take off? Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, go. So around 5 out versus 4 out spacing. 5 out is generally preferred for trying to teach all players, equally. We're not pigeonholing with a player inside or anything like that. Some teams commonly use it when they don't have a true, dominating post where you might want to have that player close to the basket. This is the most common setup of 5 out, where you do have your biggest sort of here in the middle, and your point guard sort of coming to the side. Really, if I was to take this player out and to put them there, the spacing for these guys doesn't change too much. Maybe a smidge higher, maybe a smidge higher. Okay, but to the crux of your question, yes, they should definitely be going, and it doesn't, starting 5 out doesn't mean you end 5 out. It might be that's just, a lot of it is based on the 5 being one of the slower players up on the court, and they come to here. And so you might start again straight away with them screening, and then they roll. They can stay in there. Yeah, and now you're in 4 out 1 inning, just staying in that. So that can be part of it, as well as it might start 5 out, then it becomes 4 out. There's nothing to say you have to stay in the one alignment the whole time, certainly. Yeah. Look, thanks very much, guys, for coming down. Again, appreciate tons of information here. I will put together the video and send it out to you, and the slides. I'll send that all out to you. So it's really about sort of throwing some stuff on you, and yeah, hopefully it can help you, even if you take some little nuggets that you can then go out away and add into your domestic program as well. Thanks, team.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.